Welcome to this tutorial about using a RedPort Global router for email and web browsing on an Iridium OpenPort system, presented by Dr. Louis Soltero, PhD, MCS, CTO and President of Global Marine Networks and RedPort Global. GMN's products and services are used worldwide, and the following training contains excerpts from a Skype call between the United States and Australia. Although this is typical of GMN's global service coverage, the vast distance of this particular call resulted in occasional audio noise and echo. Regardless, the information is clear and concise and helpful. Now, here's Dr. Soltero.
I'll go ahead and now show you how to configure the email. The Web Accelerator is a mail server itself. So this is a POP and SMTP server, and it's also a webmail server. To configure the service, you will go to Services, RedPort Email, and you'll click on that. And that will bring up a set of tabs that you will configure. The very first one is Enable. You will have a primary email account, which will be assigned to you. It'll be the same username and the same password that you use for the compression. So when we create your account for you, you will have that. And so you will turn that on, and then you hit save, and at that point the mail is enabled, and this router will start using the OpenPort to check mail. There's a couple settings here that I want to go over with you. One of them is the time interval. So this time interval is how often the mail program will automatically log into your OpenPort to send any mails that are pending and receive any mails that are pending. The XGate email program uses something called block compression, which means that it takes all of the email that is pending to go out, compresses it into one block, and then sends that entire block at one time. Block compression does compression across all emails, and it's very efficient. So the more email you've got to send, the more efficient the compression will be. So to give you an example, if you have one email which is one page of text, that is typically 5 kilobytes. And if you compress that down, you typically get about a 50% compression. That'll turn into about 2 or 3 kilobytes. And so you effectively got a 50% size reduction on that one email. If, however, you have 1,000 emails that are either copies of that email or very similar to that email, when you compress that down, you'll end up with something like 5 kilobytes. So you'll have 1,000 emails that are 5 kilobytes each. That's 5 megabytes that will compress down to 5K. And the reason for that is because there's a redundancy across all the emails. It's the same email replicated 1,000 times. So the compression takes that into effect and therefore creates a tiny, tiny one single file, which is equivalent to 5 megabytes or 1,000 5K emails, but compressed. And so it's good to not have the system check emails too often, because the more email you have to send and receive at any given time, the less expensive it becomes, because the more efficient your email is. And so you'll need to tailor this number, this frequency, to suit your needs. You can have it do it once an hour. You can have it do it once a day. You can have it do it every 15 minutes if you want to. The cruise ships do it every 10 minutes for the entire cruise ship. The actual email check itself is not very expensive. It's only about 500 bytes. And so in the scheme of things, an email check is not going to cost you anything. So if you want to run it at 10 minutes, that's fine. But just know that if you let it sit a little longer and collect more emails, then your overall cost for doing the emails will be reduced. And so you get to decide how frequently the system automatically checks for email for you. There's nothing else to be done on this page. Just note that if you're going to be using Outlook or Outlook Express or some POP client on the network, that the POP address is going to be 110 and the SMTP address is 25. So you can use Outlook or your Windows Mail or whatever on your PC and pop the server and send and receive emails to the server. When you send an email message to this particular server on port 25, it'll just sit there until this timer expires up here, and then it'll send that message and all the other messages at the same time. Okay, under connection, you're going to want to come here and change the network connection to WebEx Iridium OpenPort. What that'll do is it'll tell the Web Accelerator that you've got an Iridium OpenPort, and therefore it should bring up the connection before it tries to send the email. Otherwise, it'll try to bring up the connection, which takes about 30 seconds, and the mail will probably fail because it can't open the socket to the server because it'll time out. So just under network connection, set that to WebEx OpenPort, and then hit save, and that should be all you need to do there. Now, you've got a couple filtering options here. Basically what happens is, by default, any emails that arrive for you on our server will be sent to you automatically only if they are smaller than the size that is specified in the cutoff filter. That way, if someone sends you a 10 megabyte attachment, which will cost you $80 to receive, you won't get it. What you will get is you will get a notification via email in your inbox that that mail has arrived, and at that point, you can take appropriate action to receive it. You can either just reply to the email, or you can go into a web-based GUI, which I'll show you in a minute, to retrieve the message. But just know that only messages of size 50 kilobytes or smaller will be sent to your vessel automatically.
Now, is that a compressed size, Lewis?
No, that's an uncompressed size, so the actual size file that you get will be smaller than that. But on the server, they come in uncompressed, and nothing gets sent until the compression happens, and it happens in a block compression. So we don't know what the size of the actual message is going to be when it's compressed, and so therefore, we just look at the uncompressed sizes. So for you, you probably want to set that to, I don't know, 200 kilobytes or 500 kilobytes. You know your price per megabyte is about $8 per megabyte. So if you make it a megabyte, that means that someone can send you an email that is a megabyte in size, and you'll pay $8 for it, and you may not want it. So what you'll do is you'll just set the size to something small, 100 kilobytes, 200 kilobytes, knowing that you will get a notification of the message. When the notification comes in, it'll tell you who sent it, what the subject is, and what the size is. And then you can either just reply to the message, or you can go to the Big Mail GUI, which I'll show you in here in a minute, and then you can say, check, get that message for me. And then it'll retrieve that message for you the next time an email check is done. The same is true for outbound messages. For outbound messages, it's set to 250 kilobytes. If you open up Outlook or Windows Mail on your PC and you create an email message which is larger than 250 kilobytes and you hit send, it will send it to this mail server, and the mail server will turn around and reject it and send it back to you saying, sorry, it's too big, you can't send it. If you want to send it, you can do two things. You can either make it smaller. You can come in here, you can change the cutoff size to something larger, or when you address your email, so my email is lsoltero@globalmarinenet.com. When you send the email, so if I send an email to this address and it's larger than 250 kilobytes, which is what the cutoff size is, it'll bounce back to me and it'll say, sorry, it's too big. But if I come in here and I say lsoltero plus big mail and then send it, it'll go through. It'll remove the big mail out of the server when it sends it, but this is one way to bypass the big mail, and this is you telling the system, hey, I really want to send this message even though it's bigger than the cutoff that I've set for the system. But you can control the outbound sizes. For you, since you know what you're going to be sending, you can just go ahead and make that a big number because you know that you don't want to be bothered with this, oh, sorry, this is too big, we're not going to send it message. So you can send it to whatever you want.
But Lewis, that applies to everybody connected to the network, doesn't it? So
yes.
If Joe wanted to be really tightly controlled on this, she could keep that addition to the email address a secret,
yep.
so that she can send hers out quite easily, but everybody else has got to come to her for help.
That is correct. Let me just go back to the General tab here. Under the General tab, there's a couple things here that are used to control what people are allowed to do as far as big mail is concerned. First of all, there's this check mark here. If you put that check mark there, then people cannot bypass the large size filter, right? So if you put the plus big mail, sorry, it ain't going to go. So that's one way. So if you want to just apply that globally so that no one can bypass it, you would put a check mark there. Other things that you can do is when a large message comes in for someone other than Joe, they're going to get a message that says, hey, you've got a big mail sitting on the server, and they will reply to it to receive it. If you don't want them to do that, if you want only the administrator to control who receives these large messages, what you want to do is change these big mail notifications right here to send notifications only to the primary account or to send notifications to no one. If you set it to set notifications to your primary account and not your sub-accounts, that means that your sub-account users will not receive the notices, and therefore they will not know they've got these large messages sitting on the server, and therefore they can't request to retrieve them. Only you can retrieve them, and you would have to use this button up here, which is the Big Mail tab, to retrieve those messages. Finally, you can restrict outbound messages to only a few addresses. So if you want people sending email only to specific recipients, you can add the recipients or the domains here, and then they will only be able to send emails to those recipients. So there's some nice controls there for controlling who can do what and what email addresses can be sent where. So we are back on the filters. These other filters, I'm not going to worry too much about them. They have to do with the fact that they're really for narrowband. Somebody sends somebody a big, gigantic email. It's taken 2 hours to download. They don't want it. But every time they cancel and try to restart, it starts over again. So you've got these filters here that you can use to control these. Okay. Primary accounts. You'll have one primary account, which is this account that I just created. This is called test. I'm not going to spend any time with second primary accounts, but if you had more than one primary account, then you could add it here. The difference between a primary account and a sub-account is that a primary account is an address which is visible on the internet. In other words, if you were to go to the internet cafe and bring up an internet browser, you could log in as that user on our mail servers and see the mail for it. It travels between ships, so if you had a user that was moving between ships, you could actually give them a primary account and it could follow him around the different ships. And the email address is user@redportglobal.com. The sub-accounts only exist on the vessel. And so they're inexpensive, they're cheap, and so you have to be on the vessel to receive the accounts. And they're much simpler to manage because you can create the accounts, delete the accounts without getting us involved. For the primary accounts, you have to get us to create the accounts for you. There's a little more restricted that way because they're actually visible on the internet. For the sub-accounts, they're only visible on the ship, and so you create them on the fly. And so the big thing for you to note is that El Soltero at Global MarineNet is a primary account. That's what it looks like. So, for example, if my vessel were called Crystal, then my primary account would have that email address. A sub-account, like for example, if Joe is a sub-user of that vessel and has a sub-account, then Joe's email address would be Crystal, which is the name of the vessel, plus Joe@gmn-usa.com. You might have another user, Crystal, plus Larry@gmn-usa.com. You're going to have one primary account, which is the one that you configure under the General tab, and in this example, it might be Crystal. And so Joe could get email at this email address, and then your sub-accounts have the form primary account plus, and then the name of the sub-account. So if someone's sending an email to Larry, would just put this in the to address, and Larry, who is a crew member on Crystal, would receive the email. If you're the administrator and you're going to be running the show, then I suggest that you keep the primary account to yourself, because all the system messages and everything else come to you, and not use a sub-account for yourself, and then just use a sub-account for everyone else. I mean, you can add more. I mean, you can add 50, right? What's going to happen is if you add 50, when we do our accounting over here, we're going to send you an email and say, hey, Joe, you paid for 5, but look, you've got 50. What do you want us to do? We're not going to prevent you from doing it, but we'll know that you did it. If someone sends an email to boat name or, primary account plus some bogus unknown user that doesn't exist on the system, that message will end up in the primary account. This is why it's important that you be the primary account, so that messages that are addressed to the vessel that are not to a crew member or a crew member that no longer is on the vessel, that message gets redirected to you. Anybody on the vessel can access their mail, whether it be a primary account or a sub-account, using their email client on their PC or a web browser. And I'll show you that in a minute. So if you're Larry and you've got your own PC on the vessel and your email address is crystal+Larry@gmn-usa.com, you would configure your POP client on your PC to log in to this router with username Crystal+Larry and the password when they created the account. As far as the reading and sending emails on the vessel is concerned, the mechanics is exactly the same. Also, the router has a webmail program, so a user can just log into the website for the router, and I'm going to show you that in a minute, and log in as Crystal+Larry and check his email online on the vessel. What the user will not be able to do is go to an internet cafe and log in to our web servers on the internet as Crystal+Larry and check their mail. However, Joe will be able to do that because Joe has a primary account, but Larry has a sub-account or crew account. And so Larry can only check his mail on the vessel. You have a log of every email that is sent, even through the POP3, so you'll have full accountability of who sent what when. And it's an Excel spreadsheet, and actually you can sum up and you can say, hey, Joe, you sent 20 megabytes worth of data. You owe me, X number of dollars. You're sending them through this router, and so everything is logged, and all the big mail filters and everything else apply. Because you're not talking to the internet at all. You're talking to the router. Say you're Larry, right? And you go to configure Outlook on your PC. Your POP server is 192.168.10.1. The POP port is 110. SMTP server is 192.168.10.1. Okay, I'm sorry, this is, and the POP user is Crystal+Larry. And then the POP password is whatever it is. The SMTP server is 192.168.10.1. Authentication, none. So So that user can send email through the POP server. If he's got a valid account, he can send an email through the POP server. Or they can use a web browser and check their mail on the router. And I'll show you that in a minute. They don't have to configure Outlook. They can actually use webmail running on the router. That's using this account, Crystal plus Larry, on this router. Use your Gmail account, then at that point you're using a web browser configured for XWeb, and I don't recommend that. Remember, this router is a mail server, so this router is Gmail for you.
But if I was just using my standard web browser and accessing webmail,
you couldn't, because the internet is blocked unless you've gone in here and you've gone to your settings, preferences, and you've gone to your settings and you've set the proxy server. Now, you can password protect this if you want to, but right now it's open, and anybody who does this through their browser can browse the internet. They can now go to their Gmail account and check their Gmail account. So this is your settings, and people will be able to use their iPads to do email through their crew accounts, and when they do, you will have an entry in a spreadsheet that indicates who they sent email to, when they sent the email to, what the subject line was, and what the size of the email was that they sent. So if you want to bill them, you can. Okay, so yeah, so we're talking about sub-accounts. So here is how Joe creates a sub-account. Go to sub-account tab, select the primary user, which is the vessel name or the expedition name or whatever. You put in Larry, and you put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you say, this is Larry's account. You have now created a crew account. This person now has email on this vessel. All right? So if I now send an email to test+Larry@gmn-usa.com, it will be delivered. If you need more, just keep banging on the plus sign and you will hear from us. That's it. That's really all you need to do. Now, I will show you in a minute how the webmail program works. So webmail. If you go into your web browser and you put in 192.168.10.1, I'm going to use 0.32 because that's what I've got configured here. And 8,888. So I'll type that for you. So this is webmail access. Webmail access from any browser. Enter http:192.168.10.1, which is the IP address of the browser. Okay, just like that. As soon as you do that, you get a login username and password. Test. So I'm logging in as Joe now because this is the primary account. And voila, here's my inbox. Oh, an email from Kim. And so there's the email from Kim, okay? So this is kind of like a local Gmail account on the boat. And then if I log out, okay, now I'm going to log in as Larry, right? Test+Larry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is the account that I created, assigned it, and then voila, Larry now. And here's his email address. If he wants to create a new email, he just clicks on new email, types it in, hits send, and it will eventually make it off of the boat using compressed-based email. Okay, a couple things here. If you want to look at the user's mail, you just go to the spool folder and you'll see it listed here. You can actually basically just go take a look at it. So I can go to test, for example, and here's the email that I was looking at in the webmail program, and I can actually download it and read it. So the administrator has the ability to spy on people's email. Under tools, start. If you want to send an email this very second and you don't want to wait for the interval, just click the start button and it'll do an email session right now. Big mail, we talked about that. Here is the list. You'll see size, to, from, date, and subject. And you'll have a little check mark here, and you can select it, and you can retrieve it, delete it from the server. You can drop it from the list so that it doesn't bother you there. And so you will be able to manage everybody's big mail from here. As I stated, if you receive a big mail message via email, you can always reply to it, and the server will get it for you on your behalf. If this notifications message. So if the notification message is not sent, then you don't receive the notification message, therefore you cannot retrieve the message via email. But if notifications are enabled, like for example notifications for everyone is enabled, then Larry will receive a notification that says, oh, you've received a large email, and he can reply to it, and the system will get it for him. Now, let's take a look at the logs. When the system does an email session, like Larry requested that gigantic file, you'll see here under usage CDRs, okay, look at this. We've sent an email and we've received an email. It was sent on this date, at this time. It was a send. Here's the user who sent the mail. Here's who he sent the mail message to. Here's the size of the message. Here's the subject of the message. Here's a message that was received by me on this time, this date. It was sent to me, the primary account user. It was sent by Kim Soltero. It's 35 kilobytes, and here's the subject line. And so now I can bill for that usage. So you've got Total accountability, who did what on the system. So what you would do is you would just hit the download button, put this in an Excel spreadsheet, sort it by user, and sum up this column, and then bill them for the number of megabytes they transferred. If you go to status, RDR graphs, and you go here to traffic, you'll get a graphic of the usage for last 4 hours, last 16 hours, last 2 days, last month, last 6 months, and you can see how many megabytes you've used. Here we go, yeah, the last 4 hours. I've used 4.98 megabytes. So you've got accurate accounting on all of your usage, and so you know where you stand at any given time throughout the entire trip. So you'll be able to keep an eye on your usage. What you'll do is you'll go to proxy server. You'll go over here to where it says local users, and you will create a user, much the same way you create a sub-account. Then you'll go to authentication settings, and then you will use local authentication. As soon as you create a user and you come here to authentication and you just say authentication method local, what will happen is whenever the user tries to access the internet, the following will happen. www.google.com. You'll get this. Authentication required, and you have to enter that username and that password that you assign that user, and then he'll be able to access the internet. Yeah, it's pretty easy to do. Yeah, and so you notice that I got an authentication required, so I hit cancel. So I assume that you're only going to allow emails to the crew, and then Joe will be able to do some web browsing, and that will be just a controlled environment. Or did you need to be able to do web browsing and be able to charge people for use for actual browsing the internet?
I think we decided that browsing the internet was pretty much a bad idea, and I'd only do it if it was in a we desperately needed to know something.
All right. Yeah. Well, you've got the method to do that. Now, if push comes to shove and whatever, you can always just plug your PC directly into the OpenPort, right? Just be aware that if you do that, then all of these mechanisms for filtering or whatever are out the window. This is why we create these routers. We create them to control access and to do logging so that you know how much data you've used and where you stand and have complete detailed records of who's doing what when. It's all here. There's no software to be installed on anybody's computer. And you can just use webmail, right? And just do it this way. Or if you want to, you can configure your Outlook or whatever to do your account.
Yeah, I dare say the guys will probably want to use whatever webmail program or email program they have on their computer. Yeah. Because it'll have their contacts lists.
Yes, that is correct. Okay, so just one thing to be aware. The domain, their email address, right? I've been using gmn-usa.com here, but the email address is really determined by this. So if you go to RedPort email, you see the domain right here? That is the email address. So that's the domain. So whereas I was using gmn-usa.com, really these should be all redportglobal.com, unless I go here and I actually change this to gmn-usa.com. Right.
So we could change that to...
You can, but if you do, then you need to do one thing on the internet, which is to register the MX record for that domain to point to our servers so that we can accept mail for you. Now, a lot of the vessels do have their domain. If you want to do that, we're happy to do that for you. There's nothing to it. I mean, if you've got the domain registered, then you just need to go tell whoever's managing that domain to just set the mail servers to be our mail servers, and then we can receive mail for you.
Yeah, I think given the time frames we've got, it's just going to be easy to use RedPort Global.
I would just use redportglobal.com. That's the default. And so, when I went through this discussion here, I used gmn-usa.com, but really, let's just make these redportglobal.com. And that will be a little clearer, because that's actually what you'll be using. And that's what they'll need to use. When they configure their Outlook accounts, they will need to use that email address. The machine will not allow you to send email unless your from email address and your email account matches the account that you've got on this machine. Just for your own edification, this is a firewall and it has rules. If you go to the firewall section on the rules and take a look at the Wi-Fi, which is the WLAN, you will notice that everything to the internet is blocked. These little red X's mean that any machine using any port, sending anything to any machine on any port through any route is blocked. So things that are allowed are local nets, your Iridium OpenPort, you can access that. Our GMN mail servers, so that you can access webmail and XWeb, and our VoIP service. DNS is allowed only for remote sites. DNS will not work on your local net, and FTP and actual DNS is disabled for the router. So bottom line, the firewall says nothing is getting through this router. So you'll be protected and you won't have a bunch of extraneous traffic happening over this router. That's the default settings. I have not changed them. And if you look at the LAN is exactly the same way. So no one can do anything on this machine. unless they do what I just told you, which is to do email or to go into the web browser and configure the web browser for manual proxy service. And the reason manual proxy address works is because if you take a look here at the preferences again, and you take a look at your settings, the address that you're entering here is 192.168.10.1, which is the address of the router on port 3128. And if you look at the config here, if you look at the firewall rule, that's one of the local nets. So there is a firewall rule that will allow you to access a proxy server, which is why you can access the internet. Otherwise, if you try to access the internet directly, that will be forbidden, it'll be blocked, and you will not be able to do it. That's why when you bring up your Outlook and you try to connect your Gmail or your external address using your POP account, it will fail because it's not allowed through the router. Yeah, that's it. I believe that we've covered everything that you need to know in order to do this.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll catch you guys later.